All right, we need to plow through some material, and I'm not sure if that's the best way to describe it. That gives this dull and boring connotation of a farmer just dully plodding across his field, plowing. So that's not dull? No. We need to blaze through some 30-round magazines. We've got to read the Constitution. I mean, how could that ever be dull? All right, we were in the second article. There's only 7, and we're on to number 2 already. Blazing speed. All right, let's see if we can remind ourselves a little bit of what we saw in Article 2. First of all, somebody tell me, what does Article 2 deal with? The president, the executive branch, the whole executive branch. The very first statement there has kind of an oddly worded phrase. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with the vice president chosen for the same term be elected as follows. And before that, the executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. Can anybody tell me why don't they just start off there saying the executive power shall be vested in a president and a vice president of the United States? Why do they work in this vice president kind of almost like it's an afterthought? Then they had to just, let's throw that into the end of the sentence. That isn't what they did. Why is it worded kind of strangely there? That might be a little bit of a vague question.
They wanted to be very specific that the power was only in one person.
Yes, the president is the chief executive. They want to make sure he's listed as the executive power is vested in him. It does bring up this vice president as an assistant, but they didn't want it to be a co-presidency or something like that. So they were very particularly worded there. All right, the electoral college system. How many electors does each state get? This is the manner in which the president is elected. How do we determine the number of electors?
As many as the state's representation in Congress.
Okay. And today, we have a general election in each state, and that general election will determine a set of electors that will cast these official votes for the president. And today they vote 1 vote for president, 1 vote for vice president. How did that originally take place?
Because they used to just take the runner-up and make him the vice president?
Yeah, each elector would cast 2 votes for president, and whoever got the most would win, and then the second place, but there was no designation for vice president. We talked about the first couple of elections didn't go so smoothly, and we get an amendment to at least split that voting up. And the amendment has all kinds of, anybody take time to read through it? Right. It's got a long paragraph after that is correcting and re-explaining how the voting is done and how the counting is done to figure out who won, because it does change with that. So, all right, cumbersome, strange system, good or bad? It is cumbersome and strange maybe, but is it good or bad? Should we jettison it and go straight to
I think it's good.
Okay. Any reasons why?
Well,
We did list a couple in our notes here, but
it gives the people have the opportunity to voice their opinion initially whenever they vote for whoever is representing them, and then in the end they get represented as a state.
okay, we have the idea. The states recognized as independent entities, and the voting in Indiana can't affect the voting in Illinois. You know, it doesn't. Indiana could vote for Cruz Carson by 75 points to 25, and Illinois could vote for Sanders. Clinton as vice president, she would kill the guy. whoever Bernie Sanders gets to be his running mate, it could be 51-49, and the fact that it was so lopsided in Indiana has no effect there. Did you guys hear Bernie Sanders actually blamed, partially at least, the Paris shootings and all that on global warming? in the debate. He said that because of global warming, the Middle East is hotter, and therefore they're trying to get away from the heat and going to cooler climates. Yes! So anyway, it would be fun to see him and Ted Cruz in a debate, right? And just have Ted Cruz fall over laughing when he makes this wild claim on the debate stage. Anyway, that's incredible. But global warming. He didn't have time. He would have gotten it to global warming caused by Bush, but he didn't have time to finish the whole circle there. But I'm sure he was heading there. Where was I going? It contains each state is an independent election. So we have that. And that does lots of good things for us. Just on a theoretical note, it recognizes the states as independent entities, which I think is good. They are. It also makes it much more difficult to cheat. Can we think about how it makes it more difficult to cheat? Some of you are thinking, cheat in politics? Nobody would do something in such an important area of life. Yes. Sarah has no problem with this. So.
People have less opportunities to jump to different voting booth things.
You can't vote in Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin. Okay, but no, something more than that even. Let's say there is massive voter fraud in Illinois.
There is.
I was saying, there is massive voter fraud in Illinois.
It just affects that one.
Just affects that state. All right, they could cheat and win Illinois. They're going to win it anyway, but it doesn't affect Indiana. So to really effectively steal the election, you've got to have these apparatuses to cheat in multiple states, and you've got to pick the states where the little bit that you can cheat turns the election in that state. So this doesn't make it impossible, but it does make it more difficult, as opposed to just a blanket-wide, across the nation, popular election. Go to the big cities, get enough people to cheat and vote fraudulently there, then it's much easier to turn the balance. So it makes it much more difficult to cheat. So anyway, the electoral college system is vastly superior than just a straight popular vote, although there is a movement against it. So did anybody go to Schoology? And I posted a couple of videos. Okay. There's one about national popular vote, a movement to go to that popular election. There's one just kind of about the general election, the electoral college in general. So. All right, let's go on here. Paragraph 4, 5, we have the qualifications to be president. 6, we have, in the case of removal, etc., the Presidential Succession Act coming out of that. And then we have, at the end, the oath of office. Now, I cannot remember. Did we start into Section 2 at all?
Yeah.
Oh, we did? Okay. Man, we got further. I was last night flipping through this, and, that my memories of a previous life were coming back slowly. Oh, no, we did. We talked about reprieves and pardons. How could I forget that? And the reasons why. And then we saw the last part of the paragraph, he shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties. Yeah, we did talk about it. How could I forget? Did we go through any questions that come up about the treaties?
Yes.
We did get that in? Oh, okay. Man.
Does it include every agreement? No, I should have looked at it.
Yeah.
I think we're in Article 7.
Article 7. Oh, great. Hope you guys really read well for the final. All right, so then we've got, did we do the last one? The president shall have power to fill up? I wish that's all I did was just fill up. Michelle won't let him do that. We just did the treaty powers, right? So we did not finish that paragraph. So let's go back there. Let's read the paragraph from the beginning, and then we'll look at the second half. He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. Right, so we talked about that treaty-making power. He is frantically trying to claim that this agreement with Iran isn't a treaty. And, they've done all kinds of shenanigans to try to dodge that one. He shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint. I have a list of things here: ambassadors, public ministers, consuls, judges, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for, and which shall be established by law. Okay, so we have here him appointing all of the people that work in the government, all the major positions in government. Judges, Supreme Court judges, all the appellate court judges, all of the members of his cabinet he appoints. He appoints those, and the Senate has to approve them. All right, so he cannot just arbitrarily stick somebody as Secretary of State. He can pick them, and the Senate has to approve them. Now, we have a little bit of a tradition of the Senate not fighting too hard on some of these things. They kind of think, well, he's the president, let's give him some leeway since it's his cabinet. I maybe see a little bit of that, but there have, especially some judicial nominees of Obama, there have been some that were just abominable, no pun intended. And some of the Republicans didn't want to fight it just because, well, you know, it's not tradition, you know. No, they have this power to turn down these nominations, and they should. The liberals have, okay? They have fought tooth and nail. There's a phrase, someone's been borked, you know, this guy named Robert Bork, who I think it was Reagan appointed him for the court, and they just destroyed him. I mean, really, there was nothing wrong. They just maligned him so bad that he was not approved. And then the black guy on the Supreme Court. Oh, wow, his name just leaves me.
Was this just a couple years ago, or?
Oh, it's been 10 or 15.
Oh,
I mean, he's on the court right now.
yeah.
I've got Clarence Thomas in my head, but that's not him.
When was he?
Or is it him?
This is ringing a bell. Yeah, I think so.
I'm thinking of Clarence Thomas. That is him. Anyway, he's a black conservative, and the liberals just maligned him, drug out of his past secretaries supposedly that he had affairs with, and just straight rumor. I mean, there's just no validity to it. He got nominated, or he got approved, but the liberals do. But the Republicans, they talk about this tradition of not fighting it, which is really stupid. But the point is, the president appoints, the Senate approves these things, so they work together on that one. All right, and then the last part, but the Congress may by law vest the appointment of such inferior officers as they think proper in the president alone, in the courts of law, or in the heads of departments. Okay, so this gives them some leeway to say, all right, we'll let the Secretary of State hire his or her own secretary without congressional approval. So they can just, it has to be a law, they can just designate, you know, all these positions, the president can just fill them, they don't have to consult us, or the Secretary of State, or the Supreme Court Chief Justice can fill them. So the minor positions they can fill in that way. Today we have a vast bureaucracy of bureaucrats that fit into this category, they're outside this process, which is unfortunate. Some people say, oh, it would be impossible in a modern bureaucratic state to have everybody appointed and approved because there's so many of them, and I think that is just the point. There's too many of them, right? We need to pull this thing back some. But anyway, it does give the Congress here some leeway in this thing to not make the president, when he wants to hire a new janitor, send that through congressional approval. That would be a fun... That would be a fun Senate hearing. Because the Democrats, they would fight anybody, any conservative. So they would be talking about, oh, you've been abusive to sinks in the past, and you know, we saw you scratch the porcelain. It'd make as much sense as the congressman that talked about the island capsizing because we had too many soldiers on it. So, Josh can start the video. It's even more funny to watch the general try to answer the question seriously because he's not supposed to laugh at congressmen. Okay, back to the Constitution. We really need to keep moving, but there's too many good stories. All right, this last phrase we wrote, Congress making it so these lower positions don't have to be approved by the Senate. The program that is set up to take care of this is called the Civil Service Program. And there's all kinds of people that are hired by this program. Does anybody remember civil service from American history? 1, 2. We have a president who was assassinated that spurned the creation of this program, or at least expansion of it? No, back further. Garfield. Anyway, before the civil service system, there was the spoils system, and the idea there was when the president won, he would clean out everybody, literally. You know, the janitor, you know, and he'd put his own people in. And he said, oh, you know, this is unstable, and, you know, it's made to look horrible. So he came up with the civil service system where those lower positions, they're just hired to come in because they're good at whatever the job is. My dad was hired by the Mining Safety Health Administration, the mining branch of OSHA. He's a mining engineer. He was just hired, and he shuffled papers, right? He was there for multiple presidents. He was just hired because he had a degree in engineering. He knew what he was doing. He didn't go through Senate approval, right? So we have a whole lot of positions that are filled through the civil service program where people are hired, and it's supposed to be based upon their qualifications for the office, not because of their political stance, okay? And that was sold way back as a good thing, and it's still looked at as a good thing, but there is a dark underbelly to this thing. Can anybody think of the dark underbelly? We talked about it in American history. But I know that was 2 lifetimes ago. You have to go back before Empowered Youth, before Preaching Conference. So. And summer. You got to throw summer in there too. 3 lifetimes ago? Were you an animal 3 lifetimes back? Were you at that point? Muslim. Again.
So it forces the president or whatever, they're working with people who aren't necessarily given back them.
Yeah, there's this massive bureaucracy of people that the president has no direct control over. I mean, think of Bush. The last Bush was maligned when he came into office because he got rid of a bunch of attorneys in the Attorney General's office. Right? These are people that were going to be prosecuting people for him, and they were liberals, and they had begun to undermine cases that he's wanting prosecuted. So he got rid of them all. And the liberals just went ballistic and said, oh, this is politics, and, you know, it's supposed to be civil. They went crazy over it. But it sets up this bureaucracy that's outside of his control. All right? So, you know, sometimes we talk about, you know, the president should cut things back, but he can't, really. It's outside of his control. It would take an act of Congress, wow, to roll some of these things back. So anyway, initially it was sold as a way to get rid of politics in these positions, but it's really set up a system to where there's this giant bureaucracy that there's not any one person now that really controls it. Right? It'd be like, you know, if wherever you work at McDonald's or KFC or where does everybody work? Fairhaven, yeah. Josh is a good example. If you couldn't get fired, all right, think about, you know, the guy, you're required to get a paycheck from your boss, but there's nothing he can do to get rid of you. Okay. Think of the videos that would be produced for Empowered Youth then. Okay. All of a sudden, the employees, they kind of take on a life of their own. All right, and the boss doesn't have any real control over it. All right, so there's a very, very dark underbelly. In fact, through the years, presidents assigned more and more positions as being part of the civil service program. When they took office, they were positions that they got to appoint, and as they leave office, they sweep them into the civil service program so that their appointees get to keep their positions. Right? So we keep getting this thing growing and growing and growing. So anyway, it set the groundwork for this massive bureaucracy. Now, there are other factors. All right, we cannot blame our massive bureaucratic government on the civil service system, but it is at least a factor. So, okay. One other question we should at least address here. It says the president can nominate these positions and the Senate approve them and then they take their jobs. It doesn't directly address what happens if the president wants to get rid of the Secretary of State or there's an ambassador he wants to get rid of. Does he have to go back to Congress for approval on that one? And the answer there is no. We actually had a president who was almost removed from office because he fired the Secretary of State, if I remember right, without Senate approval. And they came 1 vote shy of impeaching him. Anybody remember who that was? Just after the Civil War. I mean, he was after the Civil War. Johnson? Lyndon Johnson? Not Lyndon Johnson. Wow. Another guy. So, But anyway, that question has come up. Does he have to get approval from the Senate to get rid of people? And the answer is no. I think that really is fair. That's within his power as the chief executive. If he really is going to be held responsible, then he should be able to get rid of people that aren't going to listen to him. So, all right, last paragraph there. The president shall have power to fill up all vacancies which may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions which shall expire at the end of their next session. Okay, so for some reason Congress quits meeting for this year and then our ambassador to the UN dies. We don't have to go without an ambassador to the UN. He can appoint somebody. It's called a recess appointment. When the Senate comes back into session, he's got to be nominated and run through the approval process in the Senate. But in the short term there, these positions can't be filled. If the Secretary of State dies, he can throw somebody in there temporarily. Under Bush, he nominated a guy named John Bolton to the UN as our ambassador to the UN. Anybody know that name? Very conservative, very hard-nosed diplomat. And the Senate refused to approve him. So Bush, nominated him, early part of the year and all through the year they refused to appoint him. And then the Congress broke up for the year, and then he appointed him in the recess appointment, which allowed him to take that position through the whole next year, basically. And then you had to pick somebody else. But anyway, that recess appointment, it's a legitimate thing. There's a real need for it. Sometimes it is used for political things. But that also forces, imagine the flip side, if he didn't have this power, the Senate, the Democrats could just never, ever hear any of his appointees. And then he's stuck, never able to fill them. So this allows him to fill his positions one way or the other. So, all right, section 3. And this is questions. Should we get through the end of Article 2 and just celebrate by early dismissal?
Yes.
Life is full of disappointments. All right, section 3. He shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the state of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. All right, what does this set up? State of the Union address today. It does not explicitly state a speech. All right, he just has to give them his opinion on things. And it doesn't even say every year, just from time to time. That'd be interesting. To have a president say, I'm not going to do the speech this year, and just keep dragging it out to see how long, and have the Supreme Court come up with an official ruling of what time to time means. But it's never really been contested. Presidents typically, especially today, they want to give this speech. It gives them a platform to the bully pulpit to preach their doctrine to the country. So anyway, set up the State of the Union address. It is a constitutionally mandated duty of the president. So next time you sit in to, well, don't go sit in. Next time you turn on and listen to it. It'd be one of the rare occasions where Obama follows the Constitution. Okay, he will advocate breaking the Constitution while he's following it. So, I used to listen to these things. I listened to Clinton's and Bush's, but I cannot stomach Obama speaking. I just can't. Partly because it's so bad. Sometimes don't listen to the commentators. Just listen to a speech and imagine what your speech teacher would say. It's bad. Can't stand it. And then he's just full of lies. So I haven't listened to these for the last couple of years because you're just going to lie the whole time. But it's a constitutionally mandated thing. So, all right, the next piece of that paragraph, he may on extraordinary occasions convene both houses or either of them. Okay, so if there's something amazingly dangerous that happens to our country, like an attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, he can call Congress back to deal with this type of thing. So that's what it's saying. He can call them back into session if there's some emergency. And then the other half, in case of disagreement between them with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. So the House and the Senate, they can't decide, one wants to finish on December the 10th, the other wants to finish on the 13th, and they can't decide. The president can step in and say, all right, you're done on the second, or he can kind of pick the day if they cannot decide. So that, it may have happened at some point, but I'm not aware of a time that it's happened. If you think of the lawmaking process, there's that 10-day count in there, and if the Senate, if they're not in session, the rules change. It would give him a little bit of extra leverage if there's a law he didn't want. So typically they agree amongst themselves when they do this thing. So. All right, the next part, he shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. Right, so the Prime Minister of Israel comes over. Who's supposed to greet him? He didn't. The executive branch is the one that greets him. All right, that's who does it. Congress doesn't. The Chief Justices don't. He is the one that receives and handles it. So whenever we have public officials come from other countries, it's this executive branch that handles receiving them and moving them around and that type of thing. Just have somebody designated to do it. Kind of like Mr. Ramus handles a lot of those things. If your parents come here for a visit and request housing, it's going to go to Mr. Ramus, and he'll arrange for the housing, and hopefully he doesn't drop your parents and forget to meet them or something. So, all right, so the president, or at least the executive branch, receives all of these people. I think maybe we should hold Obama to that, receive every single one, every little third-rate country around the world. He's got to meet them at the airport and carry their bag for them or something. Keep him busy. All right, the next part. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed and shall commission all the officers of the United States. So those two go together. If you're following the punctuation, there's a semicolon before, and it's one connected thought. So what does it mean to faithfully execute the laws? Now, he has done that, but not in the sense he's killed them. Yeah, he has killed them. So, faithful execution means he is supposed to faithfully, diligently make sure they are followed. Congress passes a law about immigration. He's supposed to implement that thing. Okay. He is not supposed to openly declare that he's not going to do it, which is what he's done with multiple things. Right? That's not very fair, so we're not going to enforce that part of it. Or like he's done with Obamacare, just by his executive dictation, changed the law significantly, major changes to it. So that's not his job. His job is to faithfully execute whatever the law said. Right? I was thinking of an example that just left my head. The president can give executive orders. You might have heard that phrase before. What those are officially are the president telling the FBI and the other police agencies how to carry out the law. The law says, if it said something crazy like, we're going to deport criminal, illegal aliens, outrageous, then that's not outrageous. He would then give instruction to the actual agencies about how to carry that out, which is legitimate. Okay, we're going to, if you get anytime you pick up somebody that you suspect of being an illegal alien, we got to first determine their status, and then we got to check for whether or not they're criminal, any criminal activity, and then how do we go about deporting? Just giving them some steps, some procedures to go through. Okay, those are legitimate and needed. All right, what our current president has done is use executive orders to change it, to say things like, well, if you pick up an illegal alien that you think might be a criminal, walk away and don't arrest. Or he changes the law and he says, oh, just these executive orders. I'm explaining to them how to carry it out. And he's changed the law. That is not his job. That is a direct violation of his duty here in the Constitution. So, with the health care law, he's done that multiple times. Just changed the law on his own, and he can't do that. So, and then the last part, shall commission all the officers of the United States. What is this referring to? Every single police officer in the country. Barney Fife had to be appointed by the president. No. It's talking about the law enforcement officers of the national branch. Right? It's not talking about military officers. This would be FBI agents and those different branches. He hires them. All right. Drum roll, section 4, last paragraph. That's pretty pathetic. A little better. All right, paragraph 1 here, only paragraph in section 4. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States, so all the members of his cabinet, just a wide swath of people, shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of. If you think of that impeachment process, the House brings the charges, that's the impeachment. And who does the conviction? Somebody said it. The Senate does the conviction. So they have to go through that process. And here it gives the things that they can be convicted for: treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's it. If charges were brought against somebody for, arson, they might argue that fits in high crimes and misdemeanors, but petty theft, stealing bubble gum from the corner store, there's no grounds for impeachment there. Okay. The thought here, treason and bribery, those are explicit and I think understandable. The high crimes and misdemeanors, the thought there is large, significant things. All right, we don't want them thrown out of office because they got a speeding ticket or because they were caught jaywalking or something like that. Large, significant offenses. So, and I do think our current president is guilty of some of those things. Okay. Questions? This is your chance. Interesting rabbit trails? Dull, boring rabbit trails? Actually, I have a couple of things before we start into Article 3, but yeah. Question? The dull, boring rabbit trail?
For Section 3, if he's not allowed to do all these things, how come nothing gets done? Is that just more?
The Republicans are wimps in Congress.
That's what.
Yeah. That would require manliness, and that is not a common trait amongst the men in the Republican Party. Oh well, let's leave it there. All right, I do want to very, very quickly here mention the executive departments. And I have in the past gone through all of these, but I don't think that's needed. I just want to mention these to you. They sometimes hear about the president's cabinet, some of those types of phraseology here. It's these executive departments. If you recall, back before Empowered Youth, we read Section 2, Paragraph 1. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject. There it's referenced. These executive department heads are appointed by the president, and there's different departments for major areas of concern for the president. Let me give you a list of some of them. We won't go through all of them, but these are the types of things that are there. Some of them have gotten pretty ridiculous. But there's a Department of State. The person in charge of that is the Secretary of State. That's a cabinet position. Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State during the Benghazi fiasco when she wiped her server clean with a rag and, Department of State handles affairs with other countries. All right. It's this, we talked about the president receiving ambassadors. It's actually this department that does the direct coordination of that and all of that kind of stuff. So if you ever get a passport, it goes through the Department of State, that kind of stuff. So there's the Department of Treasury. Can anybody guess what the Department of Treasury deals with? Money? More of like it signs the papers of indebtedness than money, but money. It handles everything from collecting taxes to writing checks for the government, etc. The Secret Service is officially part of the Department of Treasury. They started out trying to hunt down counterfeiters. That's appropriate since they helped protect the president. Maybe they found him. So, Department of Treasury, there's a Department of Defense. It was actually changed to the Department of Defense in 49. Before that, it had a much nicer name. Anybody know the name before that?
Department of Domestic Tranquility.
No. I thought somebody might know. It's called the Department of War.
Oh.
Which that's Department of War. I think it has an obvious job. It directly runs the military. I mean, it's so. There's a Department of Justice. It handles all the legal things. There was a lawsuit brought in the courts about Obamacare, one of the first ones, that claimed the penalty that you incur if you don't have an approved health coverage. Obama and everybody claimed, oh, that's not a tax, that's a penalty, that's this, that's that. When it came time to actually in court defending this thing, the Justice Department said, oh, no, that's a tax. It's part of, Congress can tax whatever it wants to, and it's just a tax. But they're the ones that all of a sudden flip-flop the argument in the courts to claim it was a tax. But anyway, anytime the government's defending itself in court, the FBI is part of this, the Immigration and Naturalization Service is part of this. So any type of legal activities, you might have heard of district attorneys and assistant district attorneys, those are members of this Justice Department. So, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. There's the Department of Agriculture. We never grew anything before 1889. A Department of Commerce in 1913. Again, we never traded at all. Department of Labor, 1913. Yeah, we've quit working since then. Health and Human Services, 53. This department has the third largest budget in the world. Just this department. It's behind the U.S. government and I think Russia's. But it's the one that administers all of our welfare programs. So, Health and Human Services. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Before 65, we never had any cities develop, and we did not live in houses. Department of Energy. One that, a lot of these are just ludicrous for there to be at the national level, okay? No need at all whatsoever, no constitutional authority. One that's relatively recent, those have all been recent, is the Department of Education. That's not till 79. Reagan won the election in 80, and part of his campaign was to get rid of this, of Carter's bureaucratic boondoggle, this new Department for Education. He did not succeed in doing that, but we've had this Department of Education ever since then. So, and the most recent one is the Department of Homeland Security. That was in 2001. That was put together following 9/11, and it deals with what it sounds like, security within the United States. What it did, one of the issues with 9/11 was we had multiple agencies. Some knew that these crazy terrorists were coming into the country. The ones inside the country didn't know that, and these people weren't allowed to talk to each other. All right, so this agency kind of puts an umbrella organization over top of all of these different groups to try to make sure that type of information is spread. It was really funny. The liberals who put together the law that said these agencies couldn't talk to each other, some of the people that orchestrated that getting through Congress were on the committee that investigated 9/11. It had been especially, they don't quite hammer that like it should be. I mean, it was their stupid rule that set the stage up for that thing. So
do you agree with the Department of Homeland Security that it should have been formed at that time? Into what the monstrous power it has now?
I hesitate to say I'm for it. There are other ways to do it. I mean, really, it doesn't require a cabinet level position. If we just removed, anyway, I don't know that it was. Yeah, that would have helped a whole lot. So I think there are other ways to get it done. At least it is one of the primary goals of the government is to defend us. So at least it's in that vein. It's not like the Department of Housing and Urban Development or something. But it is a little bit scary, the consolidation of power. The reason behind I don't agree with it, the reason behind the CIA not being able to communicate with the FBI is that the CIA works outside the country. And since they're outside the country, there's a lot of the constitutional restrictions don't apply. And they were fearful of them communicating and sharing information with the FBI that was gained through unsavory means, and there was that fear. I don't think very well founded. So, spy work it's not pretty. I mean, it's like arguing that, well, in war people get killed and we shouldn't. Well, yeah, of course it's war. Spy work is ugly and nasty, and the CIA is going to be involved in that kind of stuff, and it needs to be. So that was the fear. Oh, we can't have the CIA investigating people inside the country, so we got to have this wall of separation. That was the argument. A stupid argument. I mean, there were people at CIA that knew those people in the country. They brought the names to the FBI the next day and said, these are the people that did it. But they could not communicate. All right, they could not communicate. That had to. I don't know that those guys were sitting in their office saying, well, I guess it's today. They're going to fly. I don't know if they knew that much detail, but they knew they were in the country. They knew the basic gist of what they were planning, but they could not say a thing once they got into the country. They couldn't share that with any law enforcement agency inside the United States. Yes?
What if they had any?
Probably lost their job.
At least.
They like would have.
Well, we don't know. I mean, if there's never a 9/11, then this evil person, domestic spying, all these words would come up. So. Anyway, the point is, all those are the executive departments that are allowed for in the Constitution. All of these departments have to be created by Congress. The president can't just arbitrarily add them. It has to be a congressional thing to make these. All of the heads of these departments are appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. They all go through that process. So I skipped some of them, but at least you get the gist. So. All right, questions on anything there? Let's at least start into Article 3. What does Article 3 deal with? Should I make you stand up until you answer a question? Some of you might fall over and hit your head on something. I'm worried of you falling out of your seat. All right, everybody look, Article 3. I'll just pick somebody. The words are there. Oh, Shim's in trouble. If you're really, really struggling, it's the second word. The second word. Sarah. Yes. You found it. Ah, good job, Megan. The judicial branch sets up the court system. All right, let's just start into section 1. Maybe we can do all of paragraph 1. It's pretty straightforward. All right, section 1. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So here we have the wording a little bit different from the executive. There, the executive power is vested in the president alone. Here it's saying the judicial power is vested in the Supreme Court and in these other courts that Congress gets to decide about. So the Supreme Court is mandated in the Constitution. There has to be a Supreme Court. And the whole rest of that department or that branch, Congress gets to decide how it's organized. So we will, once we read the actual article in the Constitution, we'll look at how they've organized it, just some of the basics of how they've done that. But all of that is just, it's up to Congress. All right. We've had some crazy, crazy rulings from some of these lower courts. We've had crazy rulings from the Supreme Court, but they can't get rid of that. But we've had some crazy rulings from these lower courts. Rulings that declared the Pledge of Allegiance is unconstitutional, just some crazy things. Congress could evaporate the entire thing. Now, we talked about that as one of the checks and balances. Some court starts making all these crazy rules. Congress could just say, okay, you're no longer a court, right? And it's gone, right? And force the Supreme Court to handle every federal case. That would be fun. They would have to do something then. All right, but the point is, this judicial power is vested in both parts. The Supreme Court mandated, the other part up to Congress. They can decide to organize however they want to. The Chief Justice can't do it. The President can't do it. Congress gets to do that. So, all right, the next part, we read about this one. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior court, shall hold their offices during good behavior. Right? As long as you behave, you get to keep your job. Can anybody point out anything significant about that? It basically means they're there for life. It's almost like marriage, right? A life sentence. It's a nice sentence, though. Why is it significant here? Why for life? Megan's excited about something. Oh, okay.
Because then they won't be, like, trying to do stuff so people will elect them again. They'll be less influenced.
Okay, yeah, that's a big part of it. They're supposed to be independent, not trying to please people to get reelected, not trying to make some fancy rulings today so that next year they're looked at as favorable, like congressmen do. They're supposed to be these impartial judges, so they're there for life. We read about, in the Federalist Papers, some things about that, and it talked about why there's no ability standard here. It doesn't, there's nothing here about age, citizenship. There's nothing. I mean, just, there's nothing. All right, why is it like that? We read about it, but some of you answered the questions properly even. So.
How can you judge when somebody has lost mental competency?
Yeah, that's it. If there was some mental abilities test.
They can't eat their own soup.
What's that?
So they can't eat their own soup by themselves.
Yeah, at that point. But any test would be used for political means. So we had people that used to work at the nuke plant, and there was a psychological test that they would take, and some people, some of the questions were like, do you feel called by God for a special purpose in life? And,
Wow.
and well, yeah, but they're looking at it like, this is some crazy person that's going to blow up the nuke plant. That's, you know, so, you know, there's some, you know, it was, sometimes the other people would kind of coach them, no, don't answer that question this way, because this is what they're looking for, and you're going to raise flags, and you won't get hired. But it'd be very easy for any type of test like that to be used for political purposes. All right? And that was to get people off the court that you didn't think were competent. Now, there are some people on there that I don't think are competent. All right? The wise Latino woman who said sometimes you need a Latino woman to make a fair ruling. Think of if some guy had said, sometimes we just need a white man to make a smart ruling. But she actually said, sometimes we need a wise Latino woman. All right, anyway, she is on the Supreme Court. There for life. All right, it's very, very good. The president can't pressure them. Congress can't pressure them. There's very little there. The intention was for them to be able to make very unpopular rulings that were right. You know, they could rule against the president, and the president can't retaliate against them. They could rule against Congress, and Congress can't retaliate against them. It's to protect them.